Imagine a country with a climate almost identical to the United Kingdom. Mild winters, warm but not extreme summers, steady rainfall throughout the year, no harsh deserts, no frozen tundra, and land that looks absolutely perfect for people to live on. And yet, nearly 80% of that country is completely uninhabited by humans. No cities, no towns, no permanent settlements, just mountains, forests, and open land stretching for hundreds of kilometers. This country is not small either. It is New Zealand, a place that most people underestimate in size. If you were to place New Zealand on top of the United States map, its two main islands would stretch from Florida all the way up through Pennsylvania. Together, the North Island and the South Island are actually larger than the entire United Kingdom, which makes this situation even more confusing. Just like the UK, New Zealand also has an oceanic temperate climate, classified under the Köppen system as a climate with no dry season, mild winters, and warm summers. This exact same climate type exists in some of the most densely populated regions on Earth, including Western Europe, Vancouver, parts of Mexico City, Lima, Cusco, Johannesburg, and the settled regions of southeastern Australia. And yet, while the UK today has a population approaching 69 million people, New Zealand barely has just over 5 million, nearly 14 times fewer people living on a landmass that is actually larger. To put this into perspective, the average population density of the United Kingdom is about 281 people per square kilometre, while New Zealand has only about 18 people per square kilometre. This means the UK is roughly 15 times more densely populated than New Zealand. When you compare New Zealand to other islands like Java, Honshu, or Great Britain, which are all smaller than New Zealand but support tens or even hundreds of millions of people, the question becomes unavoidable. Why is New Zealand so empty despite having similar size and climate? The deeper you look into this question, the stranger the answer becomes. Not only is New Zealand sparsely populated overall, but its population is also extremely unevenly distributed. More than 3/4 of the entire population lives on the smaller North Island, while less than a quarter lives on the geographically larger South Island. Even within the North Island itself, almost half of the population is concentrated around a single city, Auckland, which is by far the largest city in the country. Auckland is strategically located on a narrow isthmus, with excellent natural harbours on both sides, and sits on top of a dormant volcanic field that provides relatively fertile soils. Today, the Auckland region alone is home to about 37% of all New Zealanders, and is rapidly approaching a population of 2 million people. This makes New Zealand one of the most centralized, developed countries in the world. Very few developed nations have such a large share of their population living in a single metropolitan area. When you look at the South Island, the contrast becomes even more extreme. Aside from Christchurch, the largest city in the South Island located on the flat Canterbury Plains, the rest of the island is almost empty. The average population density outside Christchurch is just 5.4 people per square kilometre, roughly comparable to the emptiness of North and South Dakota in the United States. This is surprising because historically this was not always the case. During the 19th and early 20th centuries, the South Island actually had more people than the North Island, largely due to gold discoveries and early European settlement patterns. Over time, however, the population shifted northward. To understand why this happened and why New Zealand remains so sparsely populated today, we have to start with the most obvious factor: extreme geographic isolation. New Zealand is one of the most isolated inhabited places on Earth. It sits almost directly in the center of what some geographers call the water hemisphere, the half of the planet that contains most of Earth's oceans. Australia is the closest large landmass, still nearly 2,000 kilometers away across the Tasman Sea. Beyond that, there is nothing but scattered islands, Antarctica, and thousands of kilometers of open ocean in every direction. Even today, air and maritime traffic in the South Pacific is among the lowest anywhere on the planet. It still takes nearly 4 hours just to fly from Auckland to Sydney, a distance comparable to flying from London to Athens across the entirety of Europe. For much of Europe, New Zealand is literally the farthest place away on Earth, located almost directly on the opposite side of the planet from Spain and Portugal. Historically, getting to New Zealand took immense time, effort, and luck. Because of this extreme isolation, New Zealand was the final large habitable landmass on Earth to ever be discovered by humans. It remained completely untouched by any human presence for most of human history until Polynesian explorers arrived sometime around the 13th century. Roughly at the same time, Genghis Khan and the Mongol Empire were expanding across Eurasia. From those initial settlers emerged the Maori culture, which developed independently for centuries without contact from the outside world. Sustained European contact only began in 1769 when Captain James Cook arrived. Compared to islands like Great Britain or Japan, which have been inhabited for tens of thousands of years, New Zealand is extremely young in terms of human settlement. As recently as 800 years ago, its population was literally zero, while medieval Japan and Britain already had millions of people. Starting with a smaller population means slower long-term growth because fewer people result in fewer births over time. Rainfall is more evenly distributed, temperatures are warmer due to its more northerly latitude, and some fertile volcanic soils exist due to occasional eruptions. In contrast, the South Island's volcanoes are dormant and have not contributed new minerals for centuries. Even on the North Island, volcanic activity is minor compared to places like Japan or Indonesia, where frequent eruptions continuously replenish soil nutrients. This explains why New Zealand has surprisingly poor soils overall. Less than 2% of its total land area is considered arable and suitable for crop cultivation, a figure comparable to countries like Jordan or Somalia, despite their harsh desert climates. Because large-scale crop farming is so difficult, New Zealand found its economic niche in animal agriculture. Vast grasslands were used for sheep and cattle grazing. Today, New Zealand has around 27 million sheep and more than twice as many cows as humans. Dairy products are the country's single largest export, followed by meat and wool. Despite only 2% of land being arable, about 55% of New Zealand's land is still used for agriculture, almost entirely for livestock. After gold resources were exhausted in the late 19th century, New Zealand effectively became an offshore European ranch. The country lacks major mineral resources, oil or gas, and is extremely far from the world's three largest consumer markets in Europe, East Asia, and North America. This prevented the development of a competitive manufacturing sector like those in the UK or Japan. Instead, New Zealand relies heavily on exporting biological products. It produces enough food to feed roughly 40 million people annually, about 8 times its own population, with around 95% of that food exported worldwide. However, this economic structure limits population growth because livestock farming requires vast amounts of land with relatively few people. On top of that, New Zealand now faces modern demographic challenges. Birth rates have fallen below replacement level, though not as severely as in Japan or South Korea. Population growth increasingly comes from immigration. Today, over 27% of New Zealand's population was born overseas, primarily in Asia, including China, India, and the Philippines. Most new immigrants settle almost exclusively in Auckland due to jobs and global connectivity. This has created extreme pressure on housing and infrastructure. Average house prices in Auckland exceed $1 million, while average annual salaries remain around $44,000, making it one of the least affordable cities in the world. This is why, despite appearing empty on a map, New Zealand faces serious limits on how many people it can sustainably support. When you combine isolation, late human settlement, extreme mountains, poor soils, limited arable land, an economy centered on livestock, and modern housing constraints, the mystery of why New Zealand is so empty starts to make sense. Most of the land simply cannot support large populations, and the small areas that can are already under intense pressure. If you found this breakdown interesting, tell me in the comments whether you think New Zealand should increase its population in the future or keep it limited, And if you enjoy content that explains the world logically rather than emotionally, you already know what to do next.